Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping right into the political scene heating up in New York City. We're talking about the 2025 mayoral election.
Right. And this is shaping up to be more than just, a standard election cycle.
Absolutely. It feels like it could really change the direction, maybe even the identity of the city.
It definitely could.
So we've gathered a bunch of sources, articles, some research, our notes, and the plan is to cut through all the noise.
Give you the essential takeaways.
Exactly. A shortcut to getting up to speed on what really matters in this race. We want to pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the incumbent, Mayor Eric Adams, everyone pretty much expects him to run again.
That's the general assumption, yes.
But there's another name creating a lot of buzz, Assemblymember Zoran Mamdani.
A very interesting figure.
Yeah, so that's our focus today. Who is he? What's this progressive vision people talk about? And, how could his potential run shake things up?
Okay.
Let's start right there. Who is Zoran Mamdani? What's his story?
Well, Zoran Mamdani has a really fascinating background. Quite unique, actually. She was born in Kampala, Uganda, and then moved to the U.S. later on.
Okay, Uganda.
And his parents are, pretty well known. His father is Mahmoud Mamdani, the Ugandan-American academic, an author.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And his mother is Mira Nair, the Indian-American filmmaker.
The filmmaker.
Yeah.
Mira Nair. Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that kind of heritage gives him this really rich mix of global perspectives, intellectual influences. It's not your typical political backstory.
Definitely not. You can just picture the dinner table conversations, right? An academic and a filmmaker.
Exactly.
So how did that, translate into actual politics in New York? How did he rise up?
It seems it was really through grassroots organizing, like boots on the ground work. He didn't just appear out of nowhere. He actually challenged and unseated a longtime incumbent assembly member back in 2020.
Right, in Astoria, Queens.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, representing Astoria. And that victory, it was seen as part of this wider progressive wave happening in New York politics around that time.
Okay. And ideologically, where does he fit? People throw terms around.
He identifies pretty clearly as a socialist, or maybe more specifically a democratic socialist.
Mm-hmm.
Often, in the same vein as someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, who uses similar labels.
And just to be clear, when we say democratic socialist here...
Right. It generally means advocating for democracy alongside socialist economic ideas. Things like more public control over essential services, maybe wealth redistribution, but all achieved through elections, through the democratic process.
Got it. So not authoritarian socialism, but working within the democratic system.
Precisely. And that identity is really central to his appeal, especially for a certain segment of Democratic primary voters in NYC.
Okay, that makes sense. So beyond the label, what about the actual policies, the Mamdani platform, as some call it? What does he stand for?
Oh, it's quite specific. He's pushing for some pretty big structural changes. Housing, for example. Obviously huge in New York.
Always.
He's advocating for universal rent control, social housing initiatives, really strong protections for tenants, against evictions, against predatory landlords.
Universal rent control.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a big departure from the status quo.
It is. It would be a fundamental shift, moving much more towards public control or heavy regulation rather than just say, incentivizing private developers.
And does that boldness carry over into other areas, like the economy?
Absolutely. Economic justice is another core pillar. He supports policies aimed at wealth redistribution, so higher taxes on the wealthy, strengthening workers' rights, think higher minimum wage, strong union protections.
Okay.
Also, universal health care access. He's talked about wanting a single-payer system.
A lot of big progressive goals there.
Definitely. And climate change, too, pushing for ambitious green programs, investing in renewables, and childcare is another big one for him.
Sound care. How so?
Emphasizing the need for affordable, accessible childcare for basically all New York families. He sees it as really critical for economic equity.
Right, because if you can't afford childcare, it's hard to work.
Exactly. It has huge knock-on effects.
So what really strikes me is how different these policies sound compared to, let's say, more traditional Democrats or the current administration.
That's the key point, really. Understanding these policies matters because they represent such a stark contrast. It's a potential blueprint for a very different kind of governance in the city.
A transformative shift, potentially.
That's the idea behind it, yes.
Okay, so we have Mamdani's vision. Now let's zoom out to the bigger picture. The 2025 mayoral election itself. How does he or someone like him fit into that landscape? Let's start with the incumbent, Eric Adams.
Right. So Mayor Adams, he's eligible for a second term, and as you said, everyone expects him to run.
And his platform has been
Generally more centrist, particularly compared to Mamdani. The focus has been heavily on public safety, tackling crime, economic recovery post-pandemic, and quality of life issues like sanitation, homelessness, visibility.
So his campaign will likely be about his track record on those things.
Almost certainly. He'll run on what he's done in his first term.
And in New York City, the Democratic primary is, well, it's usually the main event, right?
Oh, absolutely. Given the city's voter registration, winning the Democratic primary is pretty much the pathway to City Hall.
Yeah.
The general election is often less competitive.
So that 2025 primary is where the real fight will be.
That's the battleground.
Okay, and this is where things get maybe a little complicated, but really interesting.
Yeah.
Ranked choice voting,
RCV.
RCV.
Yeah.
Crucial factor.
Can you just quickly break down how that works again for anyone who might not be familiar?
Sure. So instead of just picking one candidate, you rank them. Your first choice, your second choice, third, and so on. As many as you want, usually.
Like ranking them. Then, if no single candidate gets more than 50% of the first choice votes right off the bat.
Which often happens in crowded primaries.
Exactly. Then the candidate with the fewest first choice votes gets eliminated.
Okay, they're out.
And if you voted for that eliminated candidate as your first choice, your vote doesn't just disappear. It goes to your second choice.
Ah, okay. Your vote transfers.
Right? And this process repeats eliminate the lowest candidate, redistribute their votes based on the next choice on those ballots until one candidate finally crosses that 50% threshold.
Got it. So why is this such a big deal strategically?
Well, it completely changes the game for candidates. You can't just focus on firing up your base and ignoring everyone else. You need to be palatable, acceptable as a second or third choice to voters who might prefer someone else initially.
So negative campaigning might backfire.
It certainly can. If you attack another candidate too harshly, their supporters might be less likely to rank you second or third. So it encourages, or at least is supposed to encourage, broader coalition voting, appealing more widely.
And for someone like Mamdani, with potentially strong support, but maybe from a specific progressive wing, how does RCV play out?
It's interesting. It could be an advantage or maybe a challenge. The advantage is if he energizes his base enough to get a lot of first-place votes, he's in a good starting position.
Right.
The challenge is he also needs to convince enough moderate voters or supporters of other candidates to rank him second or third to actually get over that 50% line if he doesn't win outright.
So he needs that broader appeal beyond just the hardcore progressive.
Exactly. Those second and third place rankings can be absolutely crucial. It's not just about being number one for your own voters.
Fascinating. Okay, so that's the Democratic primary dynamic. What about the other side? Is there a Republican challenge expected?
Well, there will certainly be a Republican candidate. Figures like Tom Homan have been mentioned, though it's early.
But historically in NYC.
Right. It's a very tough climb for a Republican mayoral candidate. The city is overwhelmingly Democratic.
So their strategy would likely be
probably focus on perceived failures of the Democratic mayor, whoever that is, hammering on issues like crime, maybe quality of life, trying to offer a distinct alternative vision. But realistically, it's an uphill battle.
Understood. So let's circle back to the big question then. Mamdani for mayor. Is he actually going to run?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? He hasn't made any definitive announcement. not yet.
But the speculation is intense.
Very intense. His profile, his consistent advocacy on these issues, it makes him a really anticipated potential candidate.
And if he does jump in, what role would he likely play in that primary?
He'd almost certainly become the main standard bearer for the socialist or democratic socialist wing of the party. You'd expect groups like the Working Families Party, other progressive organizations to rally around him. His platform would be centered on those big structural changes we talked about.
But running for mayor is a whole different beast than running for assembly, right? What are the big hurdles?
Oh, huge hurdles. It's a massive undertaking. First, fundraising. Mayoral campaigns in New York cost enormous amounts of money.
Millions and millions.
Exactly. And then there's name recognition. While he's well known in Astoria and in progressive circles citywide, becoming a household name across all 5 boroughs, that takes a lot of work, a lot of resources.
So scaling up is the big challenge.
Definitely. We'd obviously watch early polls, NYC mayor polls, Zohran Mamdani polls, to see what his initial citywide standing might even look like.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something earlier, a potential point of confusion we should clear up.
Yes. It's something we've seen floating around a bit. This idea of Cuomo versus Mamdani.
Right, Andrew Cuomo.
Just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, Andrew Cuomo was the governor of New York State. He resigned, you might remember.
Amid scandal, yes.
Right. He's not typically someone who runs for New York City mayor. It's a different job, different political arena.
So it's highly unlikely he'd be running against Mamdani in a mayoral race.
Extremely unlikely. Any talk you hear about Cuomo concedes or things like that, that relates back to his resignation as governor in 2021. It has nothing to do with a potential NYC mayoral election against Mamdani or anyone else.
Okay. So no Cuomo versus Mamdani polls for mayor exist because that matchup isn't really on the table. The current mayor is Eric Adams.
Exactly. Just wanted to clear that potential confusion up. It helps avoid misunderstandings you sometimes see online or in discussions.
Good clarification. So besides Adams and potentially Mamdani, who else might be in the mix for the Democrats?
Well, the Democratic primary often gets crowded. It's possible we could see other NYC mayoral candidates emerge. Maybe sitting borough presidents decide to run. City council members, someone like Justin Brannon's name sometimes comes up. Perhaps former city officials eyeing the seat.
So it could become a wide field again.
It certainly could, which, again, brings RCV right back into focus.
Right. Okay. So regardless of exactly who runs, what are the big issues that this 2025 election is likely going to revolve around?
Well, some are perennial, but definitely critical for 2025. Public safety is almost guaranteed to be front and center. Crime stats, how effective policing is, debates about reform versus enforcement.
Adams has focused heavily on that.
He has. And a progressive challenger like Mamdani would likely offer, very different approaches, maybe focusing more on root causes, alternative safety strategies, justice reform.
Okay, what else?
Housing and affordability. Always, it's a crisis.
Soaring rents, not enough apartments.
Exactly. So candidates will have competing solutions. Mamdani's rent control and social housing versus perhaps others focusing more on incentivizing new construction, maybe different kinds of zoning reform.
A fundamental debate there.
Absolutely. Then there's the economy, jobs, recovery from the pandemic's effects, support for small businesses. That's always central.
And just day-to-day life stuff.
Quality of life, definitely. Things like sanitation, street cleanliness, homelessness, the state of public transit. Those issues really resonate with voters on a daily basis.
Yeah, they affect everyone.
And education, too. The public school system, funding levels, curriculum debates, school choice, parental involvement. That's often a major battleground.
Lots of critical issues for the candidates to address.
No shortage of challenges, that's for sure.
And quickly, the timeline. When does all this actually happen?
The primary is usually in late June, but the main election day is typically in November 2025.
Okay, and there's early voting before that.
Right, there's an early voting period. And then the vote counting. With ranked choice voting, getting the final election results, Nike, can sometimes take a little longer than the old system.
Do they have to do the elimination rounds if needed?
Exactly. So outlets like NY1, the New York Times, AP News, they'll all be tracking it live, but the official certification might take some time. People will also need the usual info like where to vote, when do polls close.
Standard election
Right.
mechanics, but with that RCV twist.
Right.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the 2025 NYC mayoral election looks set to be really, really significant.
A pivotal moment, I think.
And the potential, maybe likely entry of Zohran Mamdani, bringing that clear socialist vision, It really sets up a potentially fascinating clash of ideologies.
Yeah, a strong contrast with the incumbent, Eric Adams, and potentially other contenders who might jump in. It forces a debate about fundamental directions for the city.
So while we won't know who the new mayor of New York is until late 2025,
Right, still a ways off.
the conversation and the debates leading up to that election day, Knack, they're going to tell us a lot.
Absolutely. They'll really shine a light on the incredibly diverse, sometimes conflicting ideas about how you lead a city as complex, as vibrant as New York.
So here's something to think about. What will New Yorkers ultimately prioritize? Is it going to be that kind of transformative, bold, maybe risky shift in governance that someone like Mamdani represents?
Or is it more about sticking with perhaps more familiar policies, focusing on steady recovery, maybe tweaking things around the edges?
What does that eventual choice really signal about, well, the soul of the city, its identity, its future path?
That's the big question hanging over this entire race. What kind of city does New York want to be?